Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Winegar. Can you imagine getting 1/3 of the population of the United States to sit in front of a black and white television screen on a Sunday evening to watch a ball bounce along the lyrics of a song as they sang along with Mitch Miller and his gang? Well, that's the way it used to be not so long ago. But the state of the art in entertainment has made quantum leaps. And the state of the art of education is going to be making quantum leaps very soon. Is there a crisis in education? What do you think? Recently, I watched a 60 Minutes episode on a student who was scamming the SAT tests. For a few $1,000s, he would take the test for a student so that they could get admitted to the schools of their choice. Now, the sad thing about this is the complacent attitude of the SAT administrator or chief executive officer when questioned about it. How about Penn State? The battle between charter schools and public schools, standardization, grade inflation. There are so many issues in the news today, I don't know where to begin.
Every country on earth at the moment is reforming public education. There are two reasons for it. The first of them is economic. People are trying to work out how do we educate our children to take their place in the economies of the 21st century. How do we do that? Given that we can't anticipate what the economy will look like at the end of next week, as the recent turmoil is demonstrating. How do we do that? The second, though, is cultural. Every country on earth is trying to figure out how do we educate our children so they have a sense of cultural identity and so that we can pass on the cultural genes of our communities while being part of the process of globalization. How do we square that circle? The problem is they're trying to meet the future by doing what they did in the past. And on the way, they're alienating millions of kids who don't see any purpose in going to school. When we went to school, we were kept there with a story, which was if you worked hard and did well and got a college degree, you would have a job. Our kids don't believe that. And they're right not to, by the way. You're better having a degree than not, but it's not a guarantee anymore. And particularly not if the route to it marginalizes most of the things that you think are important about yourself. Some people say we have to raise standards as if this is a breakthrough. You know, like, really, yes, we should. Why would you lower them? You know, I mean, I haven't come across an argument that persuades me of lowering them. But raising them, of course we should raise them. The problem is that the current system of education was designed and conceived and structured for a different age. It was conceived in the intellectual culture of the Enlightenment and in the economic circumstances of the Industrial Revolution. Before the middle of the 19th century, there were no systems of public education. Not really. I mean, you could get educated by Jesuits, you know, if you had the money. But public education, paid for from taxation, compulsory to everybody and free at the point of delivery, that was a revolutionary idea. And many people objected to it. They said it's not possible for many street kids, working class children, to benefit from public education. They're incapable of learning to read and write, and why are we spending time on this? So there's also built into it a whole series of assumptions about social structure and capacity. It was driven by an economic imperative of the time, but running right through it was an intellectual model of the mind, which was essentially the Enlightenment view of intelligence. That real intelligence consists in the capacity for a certain type of deductive reasoning and a knowledge of the classics originally. what we come to think of as academic ability. And this is deep in the gene pool of public education, that there are really two types of people, academic and non-academic, smart people and non-smart people. And the consequence of that is that many brilliant people think they're not, because they've been judged against this particular view of the mind. So we have twin pillars, economic and intellectual. And my view is that this model has caused chaos in many people's lives. It's been great for some. There have been people who have benefited wonderfully from it. But most people have not. Instead, they suffer this. This is the modern epidemic, and it's as misplaced and it's as fictitious. This is the plague of ADHD. Now, this is a map of the incidence of ADHD in America, or prescriptions for ADHD. Don't mistake me here. I don't mean to say there is no such thing as attention deficit disorder. I'm not qualified to say if there is such a thing. I know that a great majority of psychologists and paediatricians think there is such a thing. But it's still a matter of debate. What I do know for a fact is it's not an epidemic. These kids are being medicated as routinely as we had our tonsils taken out. And on the same whimsical basis, and for the same reason, medical fashion. Our children are living in the most intensely stimulating period in the history of the earth. They're being besieged with information and calls for their attention from every platform, computers, from iPhones, from advertising holdings, from hundreds of television channels. And we're penalizing them now for getting distracted. From what? Boring stuff. At school, for the most part. It seems to me it's not a coincidence totally that the incidence of ADHD has risen in parallel with the growth of standardized testing. Now, these kids are being given Ritalin and Adderall and all manner of things, often quite dangerous drugs, to get them focused and calm them down. But according to this, attention deficit disorder increases as you travel east across the country. People start losing interest in Oklahoma. They can hardly think straight in Arkansas. And by the time they get to Washington, they've lost it completely. And there are separate reasons for that, I believe. It's a fictitious epidemic. If you think of it, the arts, and I don't say this exclusively of the arts, I think it's also true of science and of maths, but I say about the arts particularly because they are the victims of this mentality currently, particularly. The arts especially address the idea of aesthetic experience. An aesthetic experience is one in which your senses are operating at their peak, when you're present in the current moment, when you're resonating with the excitement of this thing that you're experiencing, when you are fully alive. An anesthetic is when you shut your senses off and deaden yourself to what's happening. And a lot of these drugs are that. We're getting our children through education by anesthetizing them. And I think we should be doing the exact opposite. We shouldn't be putting them asleep. We should be waking them up to what they have inside of themselves. But the model we have is this. I believe we have a system of education that is modeled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organized on factory lines, ringing bells, separate facilities, specialized into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. We put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? Why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? It's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. You know what I mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction. That's what I mean about changing the paradigm. There was a great study done recently of divergent thinking. Published a couple of years ago. Divergent thinking isn't the same thing as creativity. I define creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. Divergent thinking isn't a synonym, but it's a an essential capacity for creativity. It's the ability to see lots of possible answers to a question, lots of possible ways of interpreting a question, to think what Edward de Bono would probably call laterally, to think not just in linear or convergent ways, to see multiple answers, not one. So, I mean, there are tests for this. I mean, one kind of cod example would be people might be asked to say, how many uses can you think of for a paperclip? One of those routine questions. Most people might come up with 10 or 15. People who are good at this might come up with 200. And they do that by saying, well, could the paperclip be 200 foot tall and be made out of foam rubber? You know, like, does it have to be a paperclip as we know it, Jim? You know. Now, there are tests for this, and they gave them to 1,500 people. This is in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond. And on the protocol of the test, if you scored above a certain level, you'd be considered to be a genius at divergent thinking. Okay? So my question to you is, what percentage of the people tested, of the 1,500, scored at genius level for divergent thinking? Now, you need to know one more thing about them. These were kindergarten children. So what do you think? What percentage at genius level? 80. 80, okay. 98%. Now, the thing about this was it was a longitudinal study. So they retested the same children 5 years later, age of 8 to 10. What do you think? 50? They retested them again 5 years later, ages 13 to 15. You can see a trend here, can't you? Now, this tells an interesting story, because you could have imagined it going the other way, couldn't you? You start off not being very good, but you get better as you get older. But this shows two things. One is we all have this capacity, and two, it mostly deteriorates. Now, a lot of things have happened to these kids as they've grown up. A lot. But one of the most important things that happened to them, I'm convinced, is that by now they've become educated. You know, they've spent 10 years at school being told there's one answer, it's at the back. And don't look. And don't copy, because that's cheating. I mean, outside schools, that's called collaboration, you know, but inside schools. Now, this isn't because teachers want it this way, it's just because it happens that way. It's because it's in the gene pool of education. We have to think differently about human capacity. We have to get over this old conception of academic, non-academic, abstract, theoretical, vocational, and see it for what it is, a myth. Secondly, we have to recognize that most great learning happens in groups, that collaboration is the stuff of growth. If we atomize people and separate them and judge them separately, we form a kind of disjunction between them and their natural learning environment. And thirdly, it's crucially about the culture of our institutions, the habits of the institution and the habitats that they occupy.
What does the new paradigm look like? It's student-centered. The curriculum is rigorous. It uses state-of-the-art technology. It's on the World Wide Web. It's available anytime and anywhere. It flips classrooms. It's self-paced learning. Assessment is authentic. Experts deliver the content. And it's fun. But beware, people can be change resistant even against their own best interests. Yes, this is a tough job. We can't get there alone, but we're going to get there because the web connects us and there is a power in sharing. We can leverage off of the skills and knowledge and talents of one another and we will do it. One important aspect of our sharing is something called the Creative Commons. And before the Creative Commons, we used the copyright law to protect our intellectual property. And what that said was we had exclusive rights to it until 70 years after our death. Now, I don't know about you, I don't care about my intellectual property 70 years after I'm gone. I want people to benefit from it now. So the Creative Commons allows me to protect my ownership of my work while sharing it with others. There are several new technologies that make the new learning paradigm possible. The first of these is ebooks. Now, I was a reluctant user of ebooks, but once I bought my iPad and gave it a try, I got hooked. You can literally do anything with your ebooks that you can do with your hard copy library, except you can do so much more. For instance, I have the entire documentation for Apple software developers on my iPhone. Podcasts are huge. This gentleman is Sal Khan. He began tutoring his younger cousins in mathematics by making YouTube videos. The public discovered them, and before long he had thousands of people learning math with his podcasts. Teachers started to assign them to their students. As time went on, teachers stopped lecturing about mathematics in class and assigned Sal Khan's podcasts. They spent their class time working together at solving problems. These are flipped classrooms. Today, Sal has started the Khan Academy, and it has hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Schools across the United States are using his podcasts to teach mathematics and to flip their classrooms. Why not you? You can make podcasts. I do. Communicating with learners is key to their learning, and so we'll use social engineering sites like Facebook and LinkedIn for their chat rooms, discussion boards, collaborative software, and file sharing capabilities. I like to announce when my classes are going to be canceled on my Facebook page. That way I can prevent students from commuting to campus when they don't need to. Another important tool is time management. Now, the picture here illustrates iCal or iCalendar, which is an Apple product, but there's tons of others out there. And as we use our time management skills, we'll get better, and so will our students. So we need to teach time management and practice time management. And it needs to be priority-based time management. When I say priority-based, what I'm talking about is looking at each task on your plate and asking two questions. Is it important, and is it urgent? Now, if it's important and urgent, that's something you need to take care of right away. That's priority A. Now, if it's important but not urgent, that comes next. That's priority B. Now, if it's not important but urgent, priority C. If you don't get it done, it's not important. And then those tasks that are not important and not urgent, I just throw them away. Believe it or not, you're looking at a learning management system on a smartphone. When I consider a learning management system, there are three things that I am particularly interested in. Number one, I need a convenient package for all of my learning content, my quizzes, my assignments, my podcast, whatever it is I want to present to my learners has got to be in my learning management system. One-stop shopping. Another thing I look for is statistical analysis. I want to know just a little bit more than what score my students earned on different tests and assignments. I want to be able to find that negative discriminator in a test. And I want good reporting. Now, there are a number of products to choose from. Blackboard, which is what's pictured here, Moodle, Desire to Learn, P2PU, and many others. There is a new movement taking place you need to be aware of. It's not the Tea Party. It's not the Occupy movement. It's the Open Learning Initiative. These radical thinkers believe that learning ought to be freely available, and so they are taking their educational content and making it available to the worldwide community of learners free. Do you believe that? Such radical thinkers as Carnegie Mellon, Harvard, Learning Space, MIT, the iTunes University, the Open Courseware Consortium, and EDUCAUSE are doing this. Let's take advantage of it. This is my own Open Learning Initiative project called the CompSci Open Learning Initiative. Now, it's based upon podcasts that provide educational content in a number of topics. Currently, I've got cascading style sheets, JavaScript, Perl, HTML, and Google Docs. There are many more topics to come. I also include links to other sites and other resources. Let's take a look at one of the podcasts. If Then Else. Parents and computers have something in common. They both make decisions. The if function is one way spreadsheets can make decisions. The syntax is if followed by three parameters separated by commas. The condition is a logical preposition. For instance, is the value of cell B4 less than 100? The true action expresses what is to be done when the condition is true. The false action tells our software what to do when the condition is false. The action can be many things: a label, a value, a formula, or a function. It might be interesting to have our spreadsheet actually determine the grades of our students. So, I've positioned myself at cell K2, where I would put Mike's grade. And here I'm going to insert the if function. So I type equals if and a left parentheses. Now I have to put in the condition of grading. We're going to start out making this very easy. Let's say it's a pass-fail course, and you have to get at least 80% of the points in order to pass. So, is the percent at J2 greater than or equal to 0.8 for 80%? Comma. Well, in that case, Mike would have passed, so I'll put a P in quotes. I'm inserting a label, and the contents of that label is P. If it's false, we'll put an F in. I'll close that up with a closing parentheses and hit return. Mike failed. Well, I ought to be able to copy that down and see how the other students performed. So we have 2 failures, Mike and Dick, but Bob, Mark, Tom, and Natalie passed. Anyone can learn to use office productivity software, including you. My best podcasting tips are: focus on a single topic and keep it brief. We have come to the end, and hopefully you've shared my vision of the future for public education in the United States and the world. And now is the time for questions and possibly some answers. So feel free to email your questions to me. I'll try to answer.